for joining. A very interesting topic, maybe not such a popular topic. People don't want to know anything about risk. And risk is so important. We encounter it every day. And these days, with artificial intelligence, the more risk on the table. And how do you manage risk? And very important topic for us is risk intelligence. How do you improve your risk intelligence? And this was my copy. There's a newer copy available. I think it's all yellow and black and so on. And the book was written in 2012, and I think it's still relevant for today in terms of the issues that sort of give you the building blocks for risk intelligence. And I would like to discuss that. I thought of also referring to another book called Noise, and Noise by Daniel Kahneman is a flaw in human judgment. Because one of the issues of risk intelligence is bias and illusions. Now, bias you could also divide into bias and noise. And there's a whole study done on what is bias and what is noise, and how does that determine your risk intelligence. Incidentally, in this book, in Appendix 1, right at the end, you could find a risk intelligence test and measure your own risk intelligence just to see how it is going. So very important, how to live with uncertainty. And I think these days, more even uncertain than in 2012. So a lot of the things that Evans discuss is actually still applicable in terms of the fact that we are still human, and humans has got certain ways of viewing risk, for instance, and how do we do that? So the contents, just to give you an idea of what the book is about, why risk intelligence matters, I think is an important chapter there. Discovering your risk coefficient, your RQ. Yeah, it's not only IQ and EQ and SQ, it's now also RQ that needs to be measured. Into the twilight zone, that is all about gray. You know, you get black and white, and there you have certainty. But a lot of decisions these days is made in gray areas. And how do you do that? Tricks of the mind, the psychological issues about RQ, madness of the crowds. It's also, you know, everybody jumping on the bandwagon and they are moving along towards a direction. And what should you be doing? Now, very interesting, an organization like Gartner would give you an hype cycle. Now, do a search for Gartner's hype cycles, and you will find it interesting to see every year how these hype topics actually falls off or moves on into a growth cycle. Thinking by numbers, weighing the probable, and remember, risk, RQ is all about probability and measuring in numbers. So thinking by numbers, weighing the probable, how to gamble and win, and knowing what you know. So very, very important. And that also determines your RQ at the end of the day, because you measure on what you know. Sometimes you discard everything what you don't know. And well, somewhere you need to get a balance. So a real interesting book with a lot of examples. For instance, two medical practitioners in the same area making two different prognoses. Yeah, what does that play? Financial analysts that predict normally very positively what a corporate earning is going to be. That is the type of examples, and it's all measured, because in this book it is all about numbers. Now, I must confess that not everything in my decisions are numbers. Sometimes it's gut feel, sometimes it's my experience, but it can be wrong, your experience. And it could be hampering growth at the end of the day. So he who knows best knows how little he knows. So this is the quote he starts off with. At the heart of risk intelligence lies the ability to gauge the limits of your own knowledge, to be cautious when you don't know much, and to be confident when, by contrast, you know a lot. Now, this is the trend of this whole book. This book is about why so many of us are so bad at estimating probabilities and how we can become better at it. It's quite a topic. So it's all about probabilities. You find weather probabilities, the crisis probabilities, black swan probabilities. Champart said, once certainty is quantified, it becomes transparent. This is what numerical probabilities are designed to do. Obvious, I will refer later to Nassim Taleb and his book, Fooled by Randomness, where he would reason why it is not only about numbers, and how we build systems and models to support our own ways of thinking and to secure a structure for our own jobs to make sure that you stay in the job. Probabilities are an expression of our ignorance. By quantifying uncertainty, we are already conceding that we do not know the facts with 100%. And that is why we do research, and within quantitative research, we would say this is a 94% probability. Very important. Research suggests that many experts have quite poor risk intelligence. That was quite interesting, especially financial experts. Coleman writes about EQ. Measures of EQ is no better than IQ tests at capturing a capacity for judging risk and weighing probabilities. This suggests that we should also test people for risk intelligence. So an important topic, if you're on a board, you would like to make an investment decision as an individual, what do you know? And how are you going to make your decisions? So your IQ, when you can measure what you're speaking about and express it in numbers, you know something about it. But when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. It may be the beginning of knowledge, but you have scarcely in your thoughts advanced to the state of science. This is very, very specific and outspoken about the importance of measuring your numbers. Now, let's go back to our educational system. And we measure the knowledge and the insight of students at schools, and we've got a pass rate. Now, yeah, that's a contentious issue. If we have a pass rate of 30%, what is the probability that me as a client will go to a doctor that has got a pass rate of 30%? Yeah, so it's important to have these measurements at the end of the day. RQ definitions, there's quite a number of them. Risk intelligence, in its simplest term, is the ability to estimate probabilities accurately. So it's all about numbers. Risk intelligence is a cognitive capacity. Risk appetite is an emotional trait. That's the difference between risk as such and the risk appetite is an emotional trait. Emotions play a very important role according to the author. So let's stay with the topic of RQ. It's making educated guesses about probability and being precise as you can in doing so. It is a powerful way of expressing the strength of your conviction. Beliefs are rarely black or white and usually comes in shades of gray, covering whole spectrum from unequivocal assurance to complete uncertainty. Probabilities permit you to express your degree of belief in relative precise numerical terms, and being able to do so is a key component of risk intelligence. Now, all of this is very important, and it really opened up my mind for this topic, risk intelligence. When Evans wrote this book, risk intelligence was still in its infancy. It's in its baby shoes. Use of the term would rather refer to objective data without various threats. But then we have David Upgard, the ability to reach accurate judgment about a specific new risk. Upgard's tests for measuring risk intelligence involve asking people to assess themselves on a frequency, relevance, impact, unexpectedness, and diversity of their experiences on the extent to which they are methodical about tracking what they learn. People seeking out diverse forms of sources of information are likely to have a higher risk intelligence than those with a narrower cognitive horizon. Then we have Frederick Funston, and he will say the ability to effectively distinguish between two types of risk. Risk that must be avoided to survive by preventing loss or harm, and the risk that must be taken to thrive by gaining competitive advantage. To create a risk-intelligent organization is not enough to have well-designed risk management policies and procedures. The people who implement those policies must also be individual risk intelligent. Now, I was wondering while reading this, how many people or organizations do have well-designed risk management policies. Probably the mines do have it, and I know banks do have it in terms of financial risk management. But to what extent do the people who manage it have a risk intelligence? So how to measure your risk intelligence? He's got a process and he discusses this quite extensively. Unfortunately, it's not possible to give you all the information about the book, but I don't want to bore you. So what I've done is just to take out certain interesting parts for me, and I think that might interest you. First, take stock of what you know about the issue. Identify the bits of information you already possess that may have a bearing on this statement. For each of those bits of information, decide whether it makes the statement more or less likely, by how much it affects the probability that you are correct. The outcome of this process should be the hunch or feeling, the strength of which varies according to your degree of belief. Finally, translate this feeling into a number that expresses the degree of certainty. Now, in an uncertain world where we have chaos and virtually on a constant basis make decisions, how do we improve on our risk intelligence? Experts and students. This was very interesting. Initial estimates are usually provided by experts, but even experts suffers from systematic errors and biases when estimating probabilities. The biggest surprise concerned the risk of project delays. Most of the systematic biases in the risk management team involved overestimating the probability of potential dangers and threats. But when it comes to the possibility of projects taking longer than planned, most team members dramatically underestimate their chances. So we are all human. I've just recently, I have a friend and he took his car to a panel beater. Oh, so within a week we will be finished. He still hasn't got his car and that's 4 weeks on. Tricks of the mind. Well, this psychology plays a very important role. And he's got these tricks he discusses: optical illusion, just as heuristic. Now, heuristic is rule of thumb of the visual systems sometimes lead to optical illusions. The cognitive shortcuts we use to estimate probabilities can lead us to make systematic errors. Also bias. He writes a lot about bias, is the tendency to overestimate the size of objects when they are surrounded by smaller ones, and underestimate the size of things that are surrounded by larger ones. Sorry for that spelling. So, and he refers to the Ebbinghaus illusion. Now, look at the top figure, and you see larger circles around a circle with a specific size. But as soon as you have smaller circles around the same size, you have the illusion that that circle is larger. and a very interesting discussion about Ebbinghaus illusion, and another so typical human, and illusion mistake we always make. So discussing mind tricks further, the availability heuristic, we can scan our mind for something similar. You know, if we've got to measure risk, we try and find out, is there an example of the past, something that happened? Wishful thinking is also a problem. MBA students have been shown to overestimate the number of job offers they would receive and their starting salary. Financial analysts consistently overestimate corporate earnings. And then he writes about source credibility. People tend to put more emphasis than they should on the strength of evidence and not enough on its credibility. And that is a typical problem we have with social media today. Who do we believe? Do we know the source and the credibility of the source? So when the evidence points strongly to one conclusion, but the source credibility is low, overconfidence is likely to result. Then he discusses confirmation bias. Pay more attention to information that confirms what we already believe and to ignore contradictory data. Correat's research suggests that one way to improve risk intelligence is to expose ourselves to a diversity of opinion. Keep your mind open, but not so open that your brain falls out. Dangers of hindsight. Hindsight bias undermines risk intelligence. I recall in 2007, 2008, when it was first predicted that we are having a downfall in the economy, nobody wanted to believe it. And then all of a sudden afterwards, there's a lot of people but would say, well, I told you so. Yeah, hindsight could create a serious problem. Mind reading illusion. Can you detect lies? You know, sometimes you're in a meeting or an interview and you wonder, are you hearing the right story? You know, yeah. I think Evans says, don't rely too much on mind reading illusion. Illusion of transparency, to see right through them. Remedy, to take the thoughts and feelings of other people with a pinch of salt. I really like that sort of remark from him. Then he's got a whole chapter on madness of crowds, and I want to entice you to go and read the book. Men, it has been well said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one. Charles Mackay. And he opens up the chapter with that. It's quite interesting, and we could see what the madding crowds can do. Thinking by numbers, he refers to George Bernard Shaw. The sign of a truly educated man is to be deeply moved by statistics. And I know that we have a number of AI sort of people that would tell you, you know, maths, coding, and these things are probably very important in artificial intelligence. I would like to refer to the book, I'm not going into the book, A Flaw of Human Judgment. I've decided to read this book because very often you've got to judge or assess a piece of work. How do you do that? And what is great about this book, it talks about bias and noise and categorizes bias and noise. So, an worthwhile book to read. With that book, I would like to refer to Fooled by Randomness, the hidden role of chance in life and the markets. Nassim Taleb has worked in Wall Street, at the stock exchange, and he actually predicted the downfall of the economy in 2007 and got sacked because of predicting that, because no one in investment want bad news. And then he also wrote The Black Swan, where he writes about the highly improbable. And that is the black swan. You cannot measure it at all. So I thought of just, because of the fact that this book was written way back, how would Evans now view risk intelligence and AI? I sort of searched the web and came across a few points I think that is important. Types of risk for AI is bias and fairness. Obvious, everybody is going to have their preference for an AI tool. What is the best? Probably bias. Just go and do some reading on your own biases and make sure that your decision to make use of an AI is not biased and is fair. Security would be a major risk. Transparency and explainability are very, very important. I think it is so complex, the issue of artificial intelligence, that most of us do not understand. And the madding crowd cheering some of the tools could be a reason for you to decide to use a AI tool without knowing precise what this tool is about. Accountability and then data quality. What you put into it, you're going to get out. And usually these AI tools require huge number of data. Mitigation strategies, data curation, carefully select and pre-processing training data. Model evaluation should be on a constant base, evaluating and testing AI model. Human oversight, you're going to need someone who's going to watch this tool to make sure that you do get the right results. Continuous monitoring, very important, transparency and communication, communicating AI systems and its capabilities for you to understand what this tool is about. And I must say, these days, there's a number of people like Suleiman Mustafa, for instance, Harari, which expresses themselves in video clips on YouTube, and it is very good to take note. AI risk challenges, I think complexity, difficult to understand, data availability. AI systems require large amounts of high quality data. Regulatory frameworks, evolving regulatory framework can create uncertainty, and prioritizing risk intelligence organizations can develop and deploy AI systems that are more reliable, trustworthy, and effective. So there's a negative side and a positive to it. But once again, I would like to end off with the words of Nassim Taleb. We do not know what we will know. So don't be arrogant about what you know. So any questions at this stage? Thank you very much, Alzali.
Thank you, Bernie. We do have a question in the chat from Jane. When you were, you had the big circle with the small circles on the slide, and with the illusion of the problem in the middle looking bigger in the bottom graphic. She's asking what would be the equivalent of a big and small object in a real life experience.
Yeah, he describes it precise, so you identify certain elements around the actual problem. Now, if your knowledge is big, probably, there won't be an illusion. But if you have smaller bits of information, you will have a different type of understanding of the problem. So, but it's not necessarily, Ebbinghaus's illusion concept is also challenged. So, is it real? But it's all part of the discussion at the end in terms of risk intelligence.
Bernie, she's asking another question. Can you see it in the chat? In today's
environment, when stats are manufactured, how do we trust stats? What can we do in this case? Yeah, it's a very difficult thing. I just heard an interview someone had with Harari on, who can we trust? Can we trust AI? He had a discussion with one of the developers of AI tools, and the developer said, well, if we do not move on with AI, we cannot trust our competitor. And this is the paradox. And he asked them, but do you trust AI? And he said, yeah. So, and at the end of the day, AI is not perfect. You need to control it. So it's a paradox once again, and you need to be at the edge of your seat in trying to establish what is the evidence and the source of the information. And that is why I enjoy watching BBC, because they try and get to the source of the news. There's so many fake news going on, especially on YouTube, and you really don't know what is real. How do you estimate? I think the guy that is going to create a tool to establish what is fake, he's going to make a killing.
There's another question, Bernie, by Bruno.
Yeah.
He says the Black Swan ideology is the celebration of being different. Doesn't this in itself contradict the whole idea of the last quote? What you do not know in, hang on a second, what you do not know not in those exact words. Wait, maybe not. Do you understand?
I could not capture the exact quote, that's why. So, but the last quote.
Okay.
You do not know what you will know. The Black Swan actually is the highly improbable. It's not as much the being different. The black swan sticks out because it's highly improbable. You know, if you take, for example, on the coast of Japan, they had a tsunami, an earthquake, and nuclear plant, burning. That is highly improbable. That is a black swan event. So the black swan on its own, if you read Nassim, clearly you would find that it is the highly improbable. And people inclined to use the black swan concept differently. If you want to use it, you're free to use it the way you want to use it, but I think you need to explain why you are calling yourself a black swan. I think then rather use Apple, think differently. Right, more questions? No more questions? I want to thank everybody that joined, because it's really a very interesting topic, and I hope that you will find the time to read the book. Right? There's a question: in the era of AI, I am very scared that some regions aren't ready because we are still dealing with the second and the third revolution. Yeah, it's a huge issue of the digital divide. I think, and there's a lot of divide: poor, rich, medicine, those who've got access, those who don't, knowledge divide, those who've got education, those who not, and it is a problem. But I think governments need to have the political will to start creating policies and regulatory issues in terms of AI. I've just read something this morning that Harari said 2027, and we've lost it. That was his words. It is quite interesting.